Take a person, take a story, take you on a journey. It's your take.
Joining me today is a gifted professional Nashville musician who's been making music for 20 years. My guest continues to be an independent music artist and to date has released 9 albums. My guest is a member of the Recording Academy and a trailblazer in championing for creative rights. She's a singer and songsmith with a love of writing and photography. Her music fits into the folk, country, and Americana traditions and has been heard on radio stations, television commercials, TV shows, film, and of course, the live music arena. On today's Your Take, I talked to American musician Rebecca Hosking. We discussed Rebecca's early life, her love and dedication to music, writing songs, the struggles of being a professional musician, and her opinions on the streaming giants. Firstly, a warm UK evening welcome to you, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice meeting you.
Thank you kindly. You're based in Nashville, Tennessee. We've got a slight time difference of, I think, about 6 hours. So it's 9 o'clock in the evening here in a place you know well, in Bristol, in the UK. And I think you're about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Nashville.
That is correct.
I'm looking forward to listening to your life story and your journey from your childhood, your early years, your love of music, and then obviously making music and earning as a professional musician. But before we talk about the career, I always like to kind of rewind the clock back and go, as I say, back in time. And I wanted to start by asking you if you can tell us where you were born and just kind of paint a portrait of family life, who your parents are, what they did for a living, and do you have any siblings?
Yes, my mother and father, I was a military brat. My father was an aircraft mechanic in the Air Force. He served in the Vietnam War. And my mother was a banker. She was a VP for a little credit union in a small town called Crestview, Florida. But moved around a lot. I moved away from my hometown. I was born in Arkansas and a little town called Blytheville. It was a military base. And I don't believe that the base is there anymore. It's closed since then. And I moved away when I was 5 years old. So I don't really have a lot of memory of my hometown. And we moved to Iceland and moved all over. Alaska, all over the United States, always in a different place. So I do have siblings. I'm the baby of the family. We're all quite old, but they're still older than I am. I had 2 brothers and a sister, and then me. And because of our military background, we traveled a lot. And growing up, all I really had was my family. It made me be quite a recluse because I was always bouncing from different schools. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I kept to myself, my nose in the books, and picked on by my brothers.
Really interesting kind of start to the interview, finding out kind of the different places you've traveled, you've lived, and obviously a military background. And you mentioned your father serving in Vietnam. I kind of want to come on and pick up on the music. Where does that kind of come into the equation? And did you come from a musical family in any way? And what sort of music was played in the Hosking household?
I didn't grow up in a musical family at all. I did I was a little girl who looked up to my older brother a lot, and both of them, my oldest brother, he liked country music, Merle Haggard, Hank Williams, you know, Waylon Jennings, all of those. And I was just a little wee girl when he moved out of the house. And then my other brother, he liked Kiss, and he liked AC/DC, and you know, that kind of a world. So I was exposed to both several different genres. My mom liked her Spanish music. She's Mexican, so I'm half Mexican, and so I grew up listening to that sort of thing as well. But no one in my family was very artistic, and I really, I don't know where I got it from, but I really wanted to, and country music just sort of stuck with me because I started out as a writer, and I did a lot of poetry. I would write stories, and even as a child, and paint pictures, and I do little comic books and illustrations and that sort of thing. So writing first and foremost was my love and passion, and the reason why I migrated towards country music is because it was just storytelling type songs, and I felt that after getting some success as a writer, it just made sense to merge into the music world. So I did, and I first learned how to play the piano, and I'm the type of person, it was a struggle for me. I'm not very coordinated. I know it's crazy to hear a musician say that, but I have no coordination whatsoever. And the piano was really a struggle for me. I took the theory that I learned off of the piano and applied it to a guitar, and the guitar seemed easier. So I just started playing the guitar.
Sure. And what kind of age were you when you first started playing piano, and then eventually you said you moved on to the guitar? And
I was
sorry,
older. I wasn't one of those, you know, kids who knew what I wanted to do, like when I was really young. It wasn't until 19 years old that I decided I was working at a music store in the mall, and I was the assistant manager, and a lady had walked in and gave me her CDs for sale on consignment, invited us to her CD release party. And I think at the time, I might be showing my age, but at the time it was actual cassettes, not a CD. So,
I remember the cassettes.
yeah.
Fondly, yeah.
So, and I went to her CD release party. I was, you know, young, and she blew my mind. Her name was Cheryl Jones. I'm still friends with her to this day. She's quite a successful musician herself, but she taught me everything I knew. She put me under her wing and tried to teach me how to play piano, because that's what she did. And like I said, I found it difficult. But she really encouraged me, and I just, after watching her performance, I just told her, I was like, I want to do that. Can I? And she was like, yeah, you could do anything you want. And she showed me how. So that's where it started.
You've
I was
spoken
19,
about
20 years old when all this was going on.
you've spoken about your love of writing, and initially that was through poetry, and shortly I want to come on to songwriting and becoming a professional musician. But before we kind of speak about that in some detail, I kind of wanted to pick up on your schooling, because you mentioned you traveled with your family and you've gone from location to location. So my question was going to be kind of, where did you go to school, or was it different schools, and were they kind of happy times in your life, and was education something you enjoyed, and did you particularly excel in education?
Um, No, I don't want I don't want to put any young kids off of education, because it's highly important. And if I knew then what I know now, I would have pushed myself in education far more than I did. But no, I didn't. I didn't like school. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of friends. I was a little shy, awkward girl. Always kept my nose in books. And so it was really hard for me to meet people, and then we would be gone shortly thereafter anyway. So no, I didn't like school. I felt I was always, I always admired people that were a lot older than me who had already lived a life. And so I wanted to talk to those people. Maybe it was the writer in me, but I wanted to talk to the people where I felt like I could learn, I could grow. You know, you know, I'd ask questions all the time, and to the point where people would be like, "Who is this little kid, and why is she bugging me?" You know, so. Uh, and I didn't feel like I could relate to kids in school. Maybe it's just because I've been to so many different places, and most of the schools I went to were, sometimes I go to private schools, sometimes I go to other military bases. Um, when my father retired and we went to regular public schools, it was like really different because I didn't realize how sheltered the military bases were until I got out into public schools, and I just didn't like it. I felt weird. I felt awkward. I felt alone. I got bullied a lot. So I just kept to myself.
From being exposed to music from a young age, and you mentioned forms of kind of rock music, you mentioned bands like AC/DC, and being particularly kind of inspired and loving country music, then obviously playing an instrument. I wanted to ask you how you go from being a music lover, then performing music, I guess, as a hobby. How do you go then to becoming to make that transition to become a professional musician, playing live music, and then going on to record your own albums and material?
Well, I never viewed it as a hobby. I get I get my an idea in my head, and I dig my feet in, and I just keep going until I get there. Um, I'm a very goal oriented person, and so I set a goal. I decided that's what I wanted to do, and so I started learning, educating myself. My mother used to always tell me, "You are who you hang around." So I wanted to learn how to be a musician. I didn't grow up in that kind of environment. So I started hanging out with other musicians and, picking their brain and paying attention to what they did. And I took it very seriously. And I never viewed it as a hobby at all. I just decided this is what I want to do. And I did it. Um, I mean, I'm no Madonna or anything like that, or Reba McEntire, but for somebody who is an indie artist, I 9 albums under my belt, and I've been exposed to some really brilliant musicians that helped me along the way. I can't say that I did it on my own. I had a lot of help, and people who believed in me because I showed them my dedication and my conviction of what I wanted to do, and they helped me. And I was really lucky and a blessed child where that is concerned.
I want to rewind the clock back and go back to kind of your earliest experiences of working as a professional musician. And I kind of wanted to ask your memories of the live music scene at the time you first started. And have you always performed as a solo musician, or initially were you in any bands at all?
I I initially started out as a songwriter. It was I was afraid to go up on stage. I mean, I could play the guitar well enough to write my songs and get somebody else to record it for me. That's when I met my producer, and he really saw some potential in me, and he helped me out. But I never really had a desire to be a live performer. Always just wanted to be a songwriter, and it just evolved over time. I uh, I I enjoyed the process of writing. I did a lot of co-writing with other people to learn the ins and outs of it. And in that process, I started learning the ins and outs of the business side of it. And the more I learned about the business side of it, it just seemed like to me, songwriters, it would, if you got your foot in the right door, you got the right artist to cut your songs, it was a little bit more lucrative, and I didn't have to worry about the whole, you know crazy, everybody in your business kind of thing. Nobody knew who the songwriter was, and I was quite happy in that position. It was later, much later in my career, that I was getting frustrated. I wasn't getting anything out there. My producer encouraged me to start performing live so that I could get heard, and I did. Then I won a contest, and that's how I started touring there in the UK, and it just all kind of evolved from there.
It's interesting. You mentioned shortly that you have always been an independent artist, or worked as an independent artist for the best part of most of your career. I want to kind of ask you if you've ever been signed by a music label, and if you currently have an agent, and how do you go about getting your music heard, and what platforms do you feel work best for you?
I have been signed to a label. It was just a small label, and at the time I felt like they had made me a lot of promises that they didn't keep. I kept my side of the contract, but I didn't feel like they kept their side. It took me a little bit of a hassle and money, time and energy to get out of it, because I didn't feel like it was the route that I wanted to take, and I didn't feel like they were as into me as they said they were. So I got out of it, and from that point forward, I strictly just went independent. And but I do have publishers. I have a publisher in LA, APM Music. They've been really good to me. I actually met them through Reverb Nation. They've been good to me, and introduced me to a lot of other people. In the UK, I've got a couple of publishers that work for me. I don't have an exclusivity with them, but when they get me a cut, then obviously they just work that particular song. But whenever they need something, they'll come to me. What do you have in your catalog for this? They'll tell me exactly what they're looking for. And I have a pretty big catalog. I'm very skeptical and anxious about handing that catalog over to just one entity. So I keep it open and I keep it to myself. But it's worked out for me, because I've gotten to know several publishers, especially on the UK side, quite well. And instead of me bugging them all the time whenever they need something, they come to me now. So again, I've been blessed in that respect as well.
This kind of leads on nicely to my next question. And I wanted to talk about specifically about songwriting, and discuss the songwriting process for you, particularly, I think, because most of the songwriters that kind of inspire me and the ones I listen to, I would say, are kind of almost narrative storytellers. I wanted to ask how the kind of songwriting process works for you as an artist, and how do you go about writing your songs? And do you try to create stories, or do you try to write from your own life experiences or encounters?
I do. But I lead a pretty boring life. So sometimes, I was taught, and I'm a sponge. Like I said, when I decided this is what I'm going to do, I went out and I talked to everybody that I could talk to, and I listened and I learned, and I paid attention to what they said. And throughout that journey, I kept repeatedly hearing, write what you know, write what you know, write what you know. Everybody kept telling me, write what you know. So I took it very literally, and decided, well, I lead a pretty boring life. I'm going to have to get out there and live a little bit in order to have something to write about. So I just went about and started, living some life, doing some traveling and that sort of thing, until I got to the point where I was just exhausted. And how many times can you push the envelope and without getting yourself into trouble, or you know what I mean? And then I realized, as I was growing as a writer, that you can write what you know in a way where you're selling the emotion, not the actual story. So we all live our lives, and we all, you know, we all have problems, we all have great days, we all have successes. So it's the universality of those feelings, of what you felt when those particular things happen. It doesn't have to be the exact story, you know, embellish it a little bit. As a writer, that's what I do, you know, take the emotion that, you know, I write what I know. I take the emotion, how I felt, and I may change the story to protect the innocent or save the guilty, but, you know, it still comes from a true place in my heart, you know.
From your point of view, do you kind of set time aside, or if you're working on a specific album, concentrate on a specific number of tracks, or does it kind of just, is it more kind of spontaneous where an idea might come into your head, or you might hear a story and you think, oh, I need to write a song, or certain words, or how does it kind of work for you? Is it not set in stone as such?
It, well, it kind of is and it kind of isn't. It always, for all the albums that I have, it always stemmed from a certain point in my life of whatever's going on at that particular time, give it a bad thing or a good thing. But, you know, and it just seems the songs are relative to that particular period in my life and what I'm going through, be it, you know, growing up, be it, you know, loss, you know, whatever, you know, finding a new love, losing a love, you know, losing, you know, that it used to be where I found it a lot easier to be creative when things were bad in my life. And I am not very articulate as a person in communicating my feelings and things. However, in my writing, I feel freedom. I feel unapologetic, you know, what I wouldn't have the guts to say to somebody to their face, I can say it in a song, or I can say it in a story. So I felt like it was my therapy, and I approached it that way, and it also, I felt, allowed me to grow as a person, on a psychological level, understanding what these emotions are, why I feel the way I feel. Am I the only one? Or, oh wait, I think everybody feels that way. So when you come to these certain realizations, and you write a song and somebody says, oh, I know exactly how you felt, or I felt like you wrote that just for me, then I feel like I did my job right. And it made me realize that I'm not, maybe not so alone in the world. Oh, that person feels that way too. You know what I mean?
From discussing the songwriting process and how you write songs and kind of where they come from emotionally and so on, I wanted to ask how you would best describe your music and how it actually sounds. And of the 9 albums you've produced so far in your career, which one are you most proud of and why?
Okay, please forgive me for maybe sounding a little arrogant here, but I love all my albums, and I love the last one that I did more than I did the one before it, and the one before that, and the one before that. And the reason being is because I feel I'm growing as a writer, as an artist, every step of the way. And if that last one isn't better than the one before it, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not growing, I'm not learning, you know. So been very privileged to work with the same producer throughout my entire career. And I contribute a lot to his work. He's created my sound. He's given me a platform to say what I want to say, and make it sound pretty. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I have to say the reason why I love them all is because each album has been a journey, and each album has history for me. But in my mind, I could hear vocally, writing wise, they each got better. So my latest one, I feel, my 9th album, I'm Rhonda's Sister. I'm most proud of it, and I do think that we pushed the envelope a little bit on this one. It's a little bit more. Most of all my albums are very folky. This one's a little bit more edgier, maybe a little bit more popular country versus traditional country, and I'm really proud of that one. I think that's my most favorite one at the moment.
Shortly, I want to move on to the Nashville music scene and you moving to Nashville and asking when that occurred. But before I do so, you kind of mentioned your producer you've worked with on many occasions. I think you mentioned on all the albums. I just wanted to ask who they are and kind of what their background was as well.
So Scott Newbert, he is an amazing musician and has a career just beyond belief. He is a touring musician. He's toured with Trace Atkins. He's toured with Hal Ketchum. He's toured. He's now at the moment touring with Crystal Gale. So a lot of big names. And not just that, Tanya Tucker. I mean, it just, the list goes on. He's had a very full career. He started in Austin, Texas. And when I met him, he was already in Nashville. And, you know, to meet this gentleman and learn about his career and become such good friends with him, you know, we're really close. I'm close with his wife. He's, you know, they're my family away from my family. And he's really, he's always been there to put a boot up my butt when I was dragging my feet. And he's been there to tell me this song is not the greatest. And he's been there to tell me that, yes, Rebecca, this song is the one. So he's always been open and honest with me. And I feel because of that, it has allowed me to grow as an artist, not just a songwriter. And he started out with me when I was just a songwriter, and I would hire other singers to sing my demos so that I could pitch them for movies and artists and that sort of thing. And he was the one that gave me the courage to stop paying other vocalists and start singing it myself. And so I really contribute a lot to him, and he has a career on his own. And the fact that that he even gave me the time of day just makes me feel privileged and honored.
One of the most joyous moments in my life, which is memories of my late father, was going on vacation to Nashville on a music trip for a couple of weeks. We went to Nashville and Memphis. And I think from a kind of music fans perspective, we've always regarded the Nashville sound and the musicians that work there as some of the finest. And I kind of wanted to ask you, what made you decide to move to Nashville? Probably I state the obvious there, but what is it like day-to-day life living and working in Nashville? And what do you like most about the Nashville music scene? And do you think it's an important place to live if you want to pursue a musical career?
Yeah, I do. I was living in Atlanta at the time, and I was driving back and forth. I would go to songwriters' nights just to meet people. I joined a club called the Tennessee Songwriters Association International, and I eventually got on their board of directors so that I could meet people. They call it a 10-year town. Unfortunately, I've been here for a lot longer than that. But the reason why they call it a 10-year town is because you got to get to know the people. You nobody helps a stranger. You got to become friends and got to network. And the only way to do that is just put yourself out there. And especially now with, you know, the way things are going with the internet and everything else, it's a lot harder to a certain extent to network because you're competing with everybody online. Whereas before, you know, it's I feel like I had the privilege because Atlanta was a huge city. And when I first moved to Nashville, it was small in comparison. It's grown a lot since I've been here, but it was small, so it felt more accessible. The people were more accessible, and I did a little bit of stalking, I would go online and I would see where people were, who was playing where, and just conveniently show up and and just, oh hi, how's it going? Yeah, there's an unwritten law here in Nashville. If you meet someone 7 times, that's when they start remembering you, know your name, and that sort of thing. So I had to get in people's faces 7 times so that could happen, and it did. And you have to get creative in order to do that, but Nashville just seemed like a little bit more accessible. When I first started out as a songwriter, I was in Atlanta, and I was talking to somebody, and he told me, he's like, there's really only 3 major places in the United States if you want to get into that. And he said LA, New York, and Nashville. And Nashville was 3.5-hour drive away from where I lived. So that's why I chose Nashville. And
what year did you first move to Nashville? And you've obviously been there for a long period. Have you seen kind of major change in as a place and also the music scene?
yes, I actually lived here in Nashville twice. Once a very long time ago, and I was a lot younger. I was in my mid-20s, and I don't think that I had the drive that I had the second time that I moved here. When I moved here the second time, it was from Atlanta, and I was actively trying to be a songwriter. I was pushing stuff in publishers there in Atlanta in the Latino scene, and just driving back and forth. I would spend 2 weeks on in Nashville, 2 weeks off, and just kept going back and forth, and finally got interest with a publisher and decided to make the move. And I've been here ever since.
What kind of time periods were these?
I think I moved here in early 2000s, 2005, 7, somewhere around there. I'm so terrible with time, but it was early 2000s.
The problem with time, it just flies like that as well, doesn't it? You kind of think, that happened 20 years ago. It's kind of crazy how time goes so quickly, and how your life changes so much. It almost seems like chapters and phases. It's been fascinating listening to you talking not just about writing songs, but also the business side of it with publishing. And you mentioned about publishers who represent you in the US and UK, and it kind of leads on to another medium you've worked in, which is your music being used for film and television.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted you just to share some of the projects your songs have been featured in. And secondly to that, I wanted to ask, have you composed any original music scores for any film or television projects?
Very first program I got a song on, it was called The Lost Girl. And I think it's a Canadian TV program. I never heard of it before. I found it on Netflix, and I watched the episode that it was on, and it was just the scene was it was a picnic, like I forget, like some kind of pie festival or something in this small town, and my song was on for like maybe 5 seconds. And it was the first time I was so excited over like 5 whole seconds. And, the episode of the program, I don't want, it wasn't my cup of tea, but I just thought that's an hour of my life I'll never get back. But I had 5 seconds of it. So that was my very first one, and it kind of did open the door for me. And then later I got on some local stuff here in Nashville. I also got on Aerial America. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that over there. It was on the Smithsonian Channel. And I got on an independent film called Fantasy Island. It was another one that was, I co-wrote it. I was actually thinking about this, and he's gonna kill me. He's a co-writer that I've known for a while. He was living here when I met him and is back in New Orleans now, is where he's from originally. And I couldn't remember his name to save my life. I feel so terrible. I have to remember that one. Sorry. But this was years ago, and we got one of our songs on together that we co-wrote together. It was, the song that we wrote was Redneck Riviera, and it got on this independent film. We actually found it on IMDb years ago, and just kind of giggled at the movie. It seemed pretty low budget, but it was something. So yeah, a lot of things like that. Commercials. I got on a commercial for a song that I wrote with another gentleman. His name was Phil Kalin, and it was for promotions for the emergency drivers, EMTs.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, and that's always kind of cool. It was the same as the first time I ever heard a song of mine on the radio. It's anytime you hear it in public like that and it catches you off guard, and the novelty never wears off. It's kind of cool.
You're a member of the Recording Academy, and you've been a key advocate for fighting for creative rights. When did you get involved in this work? And I also wanted to ask you what your opinions are on the streaming giants and the royalties musicians are currently receiving.
This is a tough one. It's a catch-22 because, which is the reason why I joined the advocacy with the Recording Academy. One, it was kind of self-serving when I joined them, because I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to also get to know more members of the Recording Academy as well. So it was another good networking tool. But at the same token, I was kind of killing two birds with one stone. I was also fighting for our creative rights and copyright laws. They needed to be reformed because, you know, the internet, it's so outdated, and the big, huge conglomerates are, you know, making, you know, hand over fist money off of us artists. In my humble opinion, they wouldn't have their platforms if it wasn't for us artists. And it's not just, you know, big name artists aren't getting the money that they, you know, in comparison to the spins that they get and the streams that they get, the money that the people are making is nothing in comparison to, you know, what they are pulling in. And, you know, very popular artists just aren't making the money either. A lot of popular artists have pulled themselves down off of it. Now, this is where it's a catch-22 for an artist like myself. I can't get recognition, I can't get heard without using those platforms. So I have to basically give it away for free in hopes that I will make enough recognition in order to start making a little bit more money. And you know, if I got to the point where I was Taylor Swift, then I would take my stuff off too. But it's just easier to get out there because everybody uses Spotify, everybody uses Apple Music, everybody uses Amazon, you know, so it's easier to get exposed. And they do, the good thing about them is they use algorithms. So if somebody is listening to a popular artist, you can get lumped into that group if your music is similar to theirs. It's through an algorithm that's how you get exposure, is because if, you know, I sound like Emmylou Harris, if somebody else is listening to an Emmylou Harris, you know, radio station, then that algorithm will throw me in there with her. So I pick up, you know, fans from her because of the algorithms and our music being similar. So that is the benefit of them. Money wise, it's not a benefit at all for artists like me.
Is the Recording Academy a music union? And if not, is there kind of any strong music unions in America, for example? And the other thing I kind of wanted to ask as well is, in the UK, we've seen so many high street record stores close down in recent years. And if you head into the center of Bristol, which is a pretty major city, you struggle now to find a record retailer. It's
Yeah.
become almost obsolete. Is that kind of the same in Nashville? And do you find that people, maybe at your gigs or on your website, do they still buy a lot physical CDs, or do you think that's changed a lot more now to kind of digital downloads, MP3s, and other formats?
You know, I think it also depends on the artist that you ask. And when I first started going to the UK, it was about 5 years ago, and I sold CDs regularly, and I did well, performing live, and I would do a free gig, but I would sell 10 CDs at £10 a pop, so not bad. You know what I mean? So I pushed the CDs a lot, but over the years, I've learned that I just don't sell as many. And some artists say that they still do. It's not lucrative enough for me to put in the money of printing the CDs myself and then selling only a few. It costs close to $1,000 or more if you just print 500 CDs. So I find it's not lucrative. And now with digital downloads, it's sort of, after I've paid for the recording itself, digital downloads is free. For me, you just download it on to the platform in which you want to sell it, and then hope that people buy it. After COVID, I'm finding it very difficult even to get my fan base to buy anything, and I know it's it's hard times everywhere, so it's really hard for me to ask
I think
buy my music. But
I think my other question was, is there kind of a strong music union in America that kind of represents musicians and them being able to kind of make money from what they do and be fairly kind of represented and rewarded for what they do?
There is a music union. I'm not a member of it. My producer is. And it also depends on, in the United States, where you live. Some unions are really good for you. When I lived in New Orleans, the unions took good care of the musicians. That's how you would get paid gigs, is through the unions. You never go to the bar and say, hey, can I play? The union would get you that gig. So they were good in New Orleans. My producer told me that it was really good they were good for musicians in Austin. And he's obviously a producer, but at the time he would get a lot of session gigs. And that's how he got, touring with some of these big names, was through the unions. But I find in Nashville that it's not as lucrative, and maybe it could be for other musicians if they're like a session musician. I just don't play guitar like the way some of these session musicians do, and I don't think I have the chops to be like get hired for somebody's demo to sing their songs. But I imagine that would be how that those session musicians get their job, is through the union. So it's hard for me to say because I'm not a member, and I have heard good things about it through my producer. So
you've collaborated and toured with a number of talented musicians. Who have you most enjoyed working with and learnt the most from musically? And which musicians or producers would you most like to work with in the future?
Scott Newbert, first and foremost, he is, my favorite musician, because he has given me so much time, energy, and talent in order to, catapult me into a position where I could even have a small fan base that I do have. I met a lot of really cool musicians there in the UK. I got complimented by Stuart Epps, which just totally threw me over the moon. And he actually complimented my producer, not me, but he was like, oh, I don't see how I could do any better for you other than what you've already got. So I was like, oh, kudos, Mr. Newbert. But it was really cool to get to meet him and talk to him and have him say something nice about my music. Russ Evans, I have to say, because I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for him. But he was a very interesting gentleman. Meeting him was really fun. He was young, he was vibrant, he's just freaking brilliant at what he does. And to collaborate with him was really cool because his style of music was so different from mine. And we wrote songs together, and I just feel like had I not had that experience with him, I wouldn't even be in the blues world, because I just don't write that kind of music. But he allowed me to get my foot in that world by co-writing with me. So he was a very interesting one to work with, and always enjoyed playing with him live.
I think interestingly as well, even though you're totally different performers and maybe from very different backgrounds and genres, you're both very dedicated, I'd say, and focused musicians, which is interesting as well. It kind of leads on nicely to my next question as well, is it's come across in this interview about your dedication, and it was always your goal to be a professional musician, and that's what you wanted, and that's definitely come across in your story and your journey throughout your life and career. I wanted to ask, do you have long-term musical plans? And have you ever considered releasing music outside of the folk country and Americana traditions or genres?
Yes, definitely. And that's, I hate to keep bringing him up, but I don't collaborate very often, but when I do, it's when I see somebody else who's as serious as I am. There's a lot of musicians out there who are just brilliant. They're awesome, and I would love to work with them, but they're a little flaky, and I say this lightly because I'm pretty flaky too, but it's hard to find somebody who is as dedicated as you are, and if you're with somebody who doesn't have the same drive or dedication, then you're kind of wasting your time and theirs as well. And he wasn't a waste of time at all, and he actually taught me a lot as well. And yeah, I would love to be in a different genre as I grow as an artist, and that's the reason why this last one, me and my producer actually sat down and had that conversation, and I said, give me some Fleetwood Mac tunes or something, let's go a little bit different direction. I was trying to get into like the more poppy country, or maybe even pop. And what is pop now anyway? It's always so. I got a million times here in Nashville, whenever I would play my songs to publishers, it would be like, oh, you're just too country for country music. And I just thought I would just walk out and I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like, how can you be too country for country? But as the years went on and I started learning the business, and I would never listen to what I play. I was always afraid that, I would unconsciously like mimic or steal something from somebody. So I wouldn't listen to the radio whenever I was working on an album. I wouldn't listen to other people's music. I would just stay focused on my own. But then I was working with a guitar player named Dave Isaacs, and he was teaching me how to play guitar a little bit better. I taught myself, so he was like, telling me, and he gave me permission to listen to the radio, listen to things that you like. And he's like, when you hear the things that you like and you mimic them, then you will start putting your own self into that, using what they did, but you by using your own voice, everybody started from somewhere, and everybody, has has laid down a path for us. And he said, you're hurting yourself and you're limiting yourself by not listening to what they did in the past. Because only by using what they did in the past and making it your own can you grow as a musician. So I thought it was really brilliant that he told me that, and it did open up my world as far as my writing was concerned, and my guitar playing.
Mm.
You know, my melodies started getting really stale when you have limited things you can do, 3 chords in the truth. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think yeah, and I'm a huge Metallica fan, so maybe my next album I'll be, you know, it'll be like a female Metallica version. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Outside of music, you're a keen writer, and you've discussed your love of poetry, and you're a keen photographer as well. What kind of material do you write other than songs and poetry? And tell us a bit about your photographic background and what specifically interests you in photography.
Um, Photography was just a way to make a living. There for a while, I did a lot of jobs, like working at J.C. Penney's, doing portrait photography, and then I worked for a sports company, Legends. I still work for them now. And I would do sports photography for little league and local stuff, and 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 then I would do graduations and stuff, but it was paying the bills. It wasn't enlightening. I want it to be artistic, and they all the poses are very regimented, and they give you do this, you do this, and I even worked for a company called Mom 365, where I would take newborn pictures. But again, very regimented, and I wanted to branch out a little bit. I started learning, about the shutter speeds and the lighting and all of that, especially at the taking the newborns. And so I just wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to be creative. I wanted the world to see the world through my eyes. And that's why I started branching out a little bit. But I can contribute to those jobs that I learned about the camera through those jobs. I was able to apply that knowledge to my own craft. And you can see my pictures on my website and stuff. But I have never sold anything of my own. I only make money off of doing those other jobs through the photography.
The love of writing, you've mentioned your interest in poetry. Do you kind of write short stories or scripts, or is there ever kind of forms of writing, like even longer stories, that you enjoy kind of creating yourself and coming up with ideas and interesting subjects and stories?
I do. I I have about 7 books in the works, just by the way. I find it more enjoyable. I'm a character study person, and whenever I write long length novels, I spend a lot of time building my characters, and to the point where I think I write stories about the one main character, the protagonist, and then I write a story about the antagonist, and then it evolves into a different book because I got too involved in building that character. You know what I mean? So I really love that. I'm a Netflix junkie. I love to watch movies, and I analyze the characters through a writing soul and through writing eyes. I'm like, oh, why did they do that? Oh, that's clever, or oh, that was predictable. You know what I mean? It's almost hard to watch a movie without it. It's not enjoyable anymore. It's like a study, But I enjoy writing full-length books. I enjoy poetry a lot. My favorite is short stories. And these are things that I do for pleasure. I have gotten a few published short stories, but as far as, a paycheck, I do how-to articles. I work a lot for magazines. I do a lot of work in the entertainment realm for online magazines. Recently been getting into psychology. So and I'm a linguistic scientist, so I've been using that background in my projects that I'm working for that company as well. So it's a means to an end. There's certain realms of it that I work in it to get a paycheck, but it also is the love of, God, if I had $1 million, I would sit down and I'd finish all 7 of those books that I started. You know what I mean?
Rebecca, shortly we move on to the quick fire questions. And these are the same questions we've asked every single Your Take guest so far. And there's a film one in there. So I'm interested to hear that one because, like you, I'm a huge cinema buff. But here's my last question. And I want you to kind of look back at your kind of 20-year career in the music business. From your experiences, what would be of advice to anyone who would like to follow in your footsteps and make a career as a professional paid musician?
Oh, God bless them. First of all, don't follow in my footsteps. Find your own path. But be serious about it. If it's what you want, then put your heart into it and do whatever it takes. A lot of musicians work a lot of other jobs in order to be a musician. So don't feel discouraged if you find yourself in that predicament. Stay focused. And somebody had told me this once, and I'm going to share it with you. The only ones who make it are the ones who never give up. So just don't give up.
Persistence.
Yeah.
Determination, and never kind of keep following the dream, I guess, and keep, even after rejection. I guess that's part of working in creativity. There's plenty of rejection along the way, and just to remain positive and keep going.
You know what? That's one thing. I'm glad you said that. Take rejection as a compliment and not an insult. If you got somebody's attention to tell you no, then you got their attention, and it's going to take 100 no's before you get the one yes that matters. So and listen. Don't argue with somebody. Don't say, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. They do know what they're talking about. And listen and pay attention. If you have the privilege of somebody saying, we didn't take this because, pay close attention to that, so that the next time you pitch that, you will know not to make the same mistake twice. They're very specific about what they're looking for and who they'll listen to. So be a sponge, pay attention, listen to what they say. It's frustrating. It's hard to hear somebody say something bad about your music, but they're not doing it to make you feel bad. They're doing it to help you as well. And they're just looking for something that you weren't just quite there yet. And pay attention. And so next time you pitch to them, it might be there. Yeah,
it's really interesting advice. We move on now to the final questions, the quick fire questions that we ask all Your Take guests. Things they like, maybe things they're not so keen on, and kind of just find out things, because obviously the interview, we've spoken solely about your life, your career, and it's pretty much been dominated by your love of music and working in the music profession. So we're going to kind of try and find out some things maybe we didn't know about you, Rebecca. Here we go. First of all, what would you say is your favorite pastime?
My favorite pastime, I like to read and watch movies.
This is the part I'm interested in. You say you're a big movie fan. The question is, what is your favorite film and why? But I'll let you choose a couple of films to share.
I do say there's so many. My most favorite film of all time is a movie called Say Anything. I don't know if you are familiar with it. It had John Cusack in it.
Yeah,
it's the one where he's holding up the radio. It's a brilliant movie. It's a great love story.
It's Cameron Crowe.
Yes,
director,
yes,
yeah,
absolutely. Almost Famous is another really great one of his as well. I also like School of Rock. I'm a huge comedian person. Like, when things are going bad in my life, or I just got dumped or something, I don't turn on like the sad stories. I turn on the rom-coms and all of the fantasy. I believe in my heart of hearts that fantasy is out there. And I love the movies. They pick me up, they make me giggle, they make me laugh, even if they seem predictable, or like that really doesn't happen in the real world. I don't care. That's my escape. You know what I mean? I love that kind of thing.
I like the fact that you chose a John Cusack film, because I love John Cusack. I love another
Me
one from
too.
that period called The Shore Thing. I don't know if you know The Shore Thing.
I do. Oh my God, that was
Yeah.
hilarious.
And another one I have fond memories about. Slightly later, we go into the 90s now, and it's got a great music soundtrack from the 80s. Grosse Point Blank, where he's the hitman that goes back to
That's a
his reunion.
brilliant movie too. He plays such a cool, smooth role in that movie. I've always been a John Cusack fan ever since. Um, my publishing, uh, for my own publishing, it's called Love Lloyd Music, and it came from Lloyd Dobler, which was the main character, John Cusack's name in Say Anything. I just think he's brilliant.
Yeah, good for you, Rebecca. And hopefully John Cusack might be listening, and we can get some of your music in a really good new John Cusack movie. Yeah, that'd
I
be
hope
good.
so. That would be brilliant.
From John Cusack, from cinema, you love a film. Who next is your favorite novelist?
I love, again, I love the comedic route. I love Anne Lamott. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She's written a few novels, and she also has written a couple of memoirs about her life. One of my most favorite books I've ever read, about a writer talking about being a writer, was called Bird by Bird. And it was by Anne Lamott. The book really, really changed my life and gave me like license to say, okay, I'm just as quirky, I'm just as crazy. If she can do it, I can do it too. If you've never read it and you're not familiar with her, I highly recommend it. And she's a bit of she touches base on some really hardcore situations in such a comedic way that lightens the load a little bit and makes you laugh through the heartache.
You've done many things creatively, not just in music, but you've mentioned writing, photography. But if you could have done a different profession, what would it have been?
Just a writer. To be quite honest, I always wanted to be a writer. Leave it to me to choose the professions that is so hard to make money in. But I even thought that, because my music started taking off and I started building a little fan base, I even thought that I could, once I win that Grammy, then surely a publisher will take one of my books. So that was like sort of my plan, to get the name so that I could, get a publisher to get interest in one of my books. So yeah, I'm always going to be a writer. Always. I think it was just who I am.
Rebecca, who in life would you say has been your greatest inspiration?
My mommy. Sorry, I lost her when I was 35. She was always there. Every time I would tell her, oh, why am I doing this? And she would always say, because that's who you are. You get, pull up your bootstraps and you do your thing. And she was a great mom. I can't speak more highly of her. And she always believed in me when nobody else would.
She was a big supporter then, yeah?
She really was, yeah.
We move on to newspapers next. Do you read a newspaper? And if so, which one?
I don't really read newspapers. Well, maybe they used to be newspapers, but I always read them online. To be honest, I don't really trust most of them, but just familiarity. I read USA Today, The New Yorker. That's about it. I've lost a lot of faith in media.
I think a lot of us have lost faith in the press,
Yeah,
sadly.
yeah.
Yeah, not just in the US where you are, but here in the UK as well, after kind of various things that have become sort of topical and newsworthy, and scandals, phone hacking scandals, and so on. But yeah, that's another story. Um,
Yeah.
Talking about cooking and food, do you like to cook? But what is your favorite food?
Mexican.
I see.
I'm half Mexican. Mexican food is, I'm not much of a cooker myself. I'm always by myself, so I don't cook much. But when I do, it's Mexican food because it's quick, it's easy, and you can make, you know, big bowls of it, and then it'll last you for a week. And yeah,
This
Mexican food for sure.
this next one seems to stump most of the guests. We ask your favorite cultural icon. It could be maybe a political figure. It could be maybe someone from history that changed history, or maybe someone who was an inventor or a historical figure.
You know what? I've thought about this one, and this it's hard for me. I learned from everybody in such different ways, whether they're good, bad, ugly, beautiful. I can't say that there's one person that I have admired over the years that is on an iconic level like that. It
Yeah.
just depends on who's popular at the time or whatever, who catches my eye. I think I like I said before, I'm a huge I like comedies. I don't like to get bogged down in the sad. I mean, life is kind of bad enough as it is. When I go into my escapism, I go in, you know, I go in the choose to laugh route. And so I think I have to say, because I'm such a huge fan of School of Rock, I have to give that one to Jack Black. He's just a goofy, fun dude. He just looks like somebody you would want to hang out with. I think he's cool. I like Jack Black.
Why not? This one's always funny. What would you say is your favorite curse word and why?
um, my mother would fuss at me because she didn't like me whenever I would say bad words. So, but I don't know. It just depends. Like, you know, whenever you're mad or something, you can't just say, "Oh, poopy head," and it work. You know, you
Right.
have to like you have to say the cuss word to make it like
You do indeed.
emphasize it the way that you want to. So I don't know. It just depends on how I feel at any given time.
If you had to choose one, what would it be? Do you know?
Probably fuck.
Most people choose that one. You're a very well-traveled lady, but what would you say is your favorite place or holiday destination?
My favorite place that I've been to was Nepal. It was just an amazing place, beautiful people. I feel very privileged that I had the opportunity to go there, and I've been trying to get back ever since, and I just haven't been able to. But yeah, Nepal was a beautiful place.
I'm not sure I want to ask you this next one. How do you ask a musician who their favorite music artist is? But who is your favorite music artist? If you had to choose one or some, what would you say is your all-time favorite album?
John Mellencamp is my absolute favorite. And I say this because I had a crush on him when I was a little girl, and the crush just never went away. I still think he's great. I love his music. Later in life, he actually influenced my writing as well. His songs have, you know, that small town storytelling kind of vibe as well. I think his best album was Scarecrow.
Yeah, that's a great album. I was going to mention
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, Scarecrow was my favorite one of his. He's had many and some that are good too, but that one I felt like it came out at a time in his life where I feel like maybe he was going through a midlife crisis and realizing that what he said made a difference, and I think he really woke up in that album. It had something to say. you know, it wasn't just a pop album. I thought it was really, I think he was really coming from his heart. At least that's how I felt it. I don't know, I can't speak for him, but I really felt that that was a turning point for him in his career.
Do you have a favorite all-time album that you maybe go back to on a regular basis or revisit and listen to?
Fleetwood Mac for sure. Rumors, that's a brilliant album. I love Stevie Nicks. The Woman Can Do No Wrong in my eyes, and I just think, you know, if not Rumors, that's a great album. Every song on there, I know verbatim. I know word for word. If not that one, then one of her solo ones as well. She's had Belladonna was just incredible. I think she's amazing. A huge influence on my life, my writing, my, you know.
The final two questions, but before we do, I like the John Mellencamp choice. I don't know a lot about his music. I've got a couple of albums, and I kind of feel he's a little bit underrated. And sadly, in this country, all we ever hear on the radio is Jack and Diane constantly. We don't hear any. It's a good song, but I feel he's a little bit. I don't kind of feel he's rated in this country as highly maybe as he should be.
Yeah, I highly recommend you go and checking him out. I think he's great. He's and I agree. I was talking to a friend just the other day, and we were sharing music back and forth, and I played a John Mellencamp song for him, and he was like, "Oh, who is that? That's brilliant!" And he really liked it. So I think you're right. He might be underrated in your country, but well, maybe here too. Here too.
Rebecca, what would you say is your greatest achievement to date?
I haven't got there yet. My greatest achievement to date is still staying afloat, doing what I do.
That's a lovely answer. And the final question to wrap up the interview, Rebecca Hosking. We get deep, the complex question. How do you wish to be remembered?
As a good person, that's all I ever want. I just want people to, if I'm ever remembered at all, I want them to say she was a hard worker. I liked what she did, and she was a nice person. That's all I want.
Thank you kindly for taking an hour plus out of your day to be a guest on Your Take. I found it a really interesting interview. It's just been interesting to hear your journey, your dedication to what you've always wanted to do, and that's perform music to audiences and write songs and do something creative. And it's just been interesting to hear your views on all sorts of things, like not just the record industry, but people buying physical CDs, streaming. We spoke about kind of musicians' rights and unions. We kind of got quite deep, and it's been really interesting. So thank you kindly for sharing your journey and so far in your career.
Thank you so much. I had a blast. I was like all nervous before, and you made me relax, and then I started like just mouthing off.
And lastly, before we kind of wrap the interview, I wanted to ask you, if people want to find out more about your music, if people want to see you on the live scene, will you maybe be coming to the UK? How do we listen to your music? Do you have kind of a YouTube channel? Where can we buy your CDs and so on? What's the best place? Where's the best place to go?
Absolutely. I do have a website. It's just RebeccaHosking.com. And it has all of my music. It has my photography. I'm also a painter as well. It has my paintings and drawings. And it will have my tour dates on there as well. I haven't toured as much since COVID, but now things are starting to open up again. So I definitely want to get back on the road again. And I definitely will be back in Bristol. So please follow me, and I will be back there soon. And I really love the UK. I have it's a very small fan base, but the fan base that I do have, they're loyal. They're beautiful people. They have welcomed me into their homes, and I may disappear but every time I come back, they always say, "Oh, she's back," and they're ready to listen. So I want to thank them as well.
Interestingly, before we wrap the interview, before we hit record and we started this conversation tonight, we're kind of thousands of miles apart. I don't know the exact mileage or distance between Bristol, UK, and Nashville, Tennessee, but I imagine it's thousands and thousands of miles. I'm not sure how long it takes to get there on an airplane. I think it's about 10 hours, maybe a bit less. We have a time difference of 6 hours, but interestingly, it's really strange that you said, I said, oh, you played Bristol a few times, you've been to my home city. And you said, oh, I lived in Bristol at one time. When I asked you which part, you happened to live in the part which I kind of grew up in, a place called Fish Ponds, which is literally my kind of home, my birthplace pretty much. And
That's awesome.
it's
Stay in
kind
the
of
small world.
it's quite surreal that we're thousands of miles apart, but close because of Zoom and digital technology. And yet, you lived in the same place at one time. So maybe our paths have crossed. Maybe we've walked past one another. Maybe we've been in the same pub in Fish Ponds. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And hopefully our paths will cross again.
No, thank you, Kyla. I'm really looking forward to you coming to Bristol and seeing you live. I really would love to.
Cool.
Lastly, I wish you all the very best in the future. And thanks again for being a guest on Your Take.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun.